What will the Red Sox bullpen look like going into the 2023 season?
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to welcome you back into the Locked On Red Sox podcast, and thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. I'm your host, Jake Ignaszewski, and here with a very special guest. He's the founder of Beyond the Monster and co-host of the Obstructed View, Chris Henrique. So how are we doing, Chris?
What's going on? I'm good.
So, by the way, in the last episode that Lauren and I recorded, we were talking about, like I mentioned, how you guys just had on Chaim Bloom with the Obstructed View podcast, and she was doing a game time ad read, and she was talking about all the obstructed views in Fenway Park. And I literally said after the ad, I'm like, now I just connected the dots of like why your guys' podcast is called Obstructed View. I had no clue.
Yeah, we when we were trying to figure out a name, obviously the hardest thing in the world is figure out what you want to name your podcast.
True.
And then it was actually Steve, one of the co-hosts, and he mentioned how there's a bunch of obstructed views at Fenway, and I'm like, oh, it's perfect. So whenever we go to a game, even if we're not sitting in an obstructed viewed area, we always like to take a picture with the pole in the way, and so we can continue that. And hopefully we can do that a lot this year.
So you'd find this funny because, like, obviously, like we're going to opening day together with Stephen Brown as well. And, you know, while I was looking at tickets, I didn't tell you this, but it goes into like with the poll and everything. You know, they have the grandstand tickets like over, you know, with like the navy blue seats. And then, you know, we're sitting in like right field. But like I was either thinking the right field area or the grandstand seats. And it was literally in that spot where it's like a little bit cheaper because you're either behind the pole or you're close right next to the pole. And I was like, I'm not going to risk it with three people potentially being behind the pole. So, you know, we could have had some obstructed views if I ended up getting those tickets.
Yeah, we had, I think it was against the White Sox last year. It was either the White Sox or the Yankees, and we sat up in the right field grandstand, and literally about 4 rows behind my seat, boom, there was the pole with the TV. God. We were able to move over a little bit later on, but it was inadvertent that we ended up getting obstructed view. So,
and like with those seats, like, I mean, especially with the poles in your way, like, obviously it's nice that they have the TV, but like, why are you going to pay to watch the freaking TV when you could do that like at your own house?
That's what I was saying. I'm like, guys,
well, you got to love Fenway. Like,
yeah.
But today we're going to be talking about the Red Sox bullpen, which obviously last year was one of the biggest Achilles heels of the entire team. Luckily added a lot during the offseason, a closer in Kenley Jansen, a lot of other arms in Joey Rodriguez, who will miss the beginning of the season, Chris Martin as well. But for you, looking at this Red Sox bullpen, how much better do you think it's going to be compared to last year, and how critical do you think their performance is going to play in terms of the Red Sox winning games?
Yeah, so it's important, one, that they have a closer, and that's something that this team has lacked for the longest time, probably really since Craig Kimbrell, where they've had a legitimate ninth inning option. And Kenley Jansen, you know, he's a veteran of pitching in the ninth, comes here to Boston, and now you have a guy that you can go to. You know, to nail the door closed in the ninth. I actually, though, think that Chris Martin is the sneakier signing of this offseason because, you know, he was lights out after he got traded last year. And now he comes here and you have an eighth inning option where last year it's Brazier, Sawamura, you know, Austin Davis. Like, it was a rotating chorus of players, where now that's not the case, where there's players in here who have legitimate roles. You know, I was excited to see what Rodriguez could have you know, brought to the team, but obviously he's out right now with that oblique. I think Richard Blyer is a really, really good pickup, left-handed side. So it's just the fact that these guys have legitimate roles, and Alex Cora has people that he can depend on and rely on that have pitched in big situations. That's important this year, and I think the Red Sox will benefit out of that.
I think especially with those specific roles, that's one thing that, you heard Cora talk a lot about throughout last season is just being able to put guys in different situations, being able to define those roles. Because especially when the team didn't have a closer, I'll never forget there was plenty of nights where I had to record an episode after the game and, going into the, bottom of the ninth or top of the ninth, whatever it was, me thinking in my mind, oh, we're going to win the game. And obviously, like anytime Jake Diekman came in, like the game was essentially just punted. And then I came on here ranting about like super pissed off that like the Red Sox need a closer. But the one thing that I am curious to see how it all does stack up, like you brought up like the left-handed side for Flyer, and especially with Rodriguez being out to start the season, they're probably going to need a second left-handed option. But according to Alex Cora today, reported by Julian McWilliams, the Red Sox have one more decision to make, and it pertains on one more bullpen arm. Yeah. I'm curious who you think that could be.
Well, I forget this morning, so we're recording on Sunday, so I forget if it was Ian Brown that may have said that Caleb Ort, they're trying to decide between that. I don't understand what the decision is there with Ort. But if you look at some of the specifically left-handers, Sheriff has pitched really well. And a veteran, I think he's got like 44 games under his belt. Mm-hmm. He's had a good spring. And, there really isn't much risk when it comes to that. I feel like he's a guy that you could add to the 40-man, and then you put him on the big league roster. And let's say he's here for 30 games, 35, 40 games. Is he a player that's in danger if you were to DFA him, that he could get claimed and maybe you might be able to sneak him back down? And I'm not saying that in respect to be disrespectful. I don't mean it in that way, but I mean in more of the case of I'd rather roll the dice there than a guy like Moscata, you know what I mean, where you can get him a little bit later on. So I feel like that would be a good option to go with. I know last year, wasn't it just they had one lefty?
Yeah, they did. And they kept on hoping that, Josh Taylor was going to be able to come up and be able to help fill that position. But I think, with differentiating right and left, like that obviously helps the different looks against the batters.
Yeah. So yeah, and even too, like if we were to talk about this like during the winter, the fact that the guys, some of these non-roster guys that could make the roster this year, is surprising. But it goes to show that the Red Sox really, in my opinion, they did their due diligence in trying to find additional depth for this team outside of the traditional ways of giving major league deals. So for me, I wouldn't hate them adding Sheriff. I think that's, in my opinion, the right move to do. But Heimblum has made a lot of decisions over the last couple of months that we've gone and said like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting that. Matt Barnes DFA, wasn't expecting that. So they could make a random one-off decision on who they're gonna give that spot to, and who knows, maybe it could be Caleb Ward, because they do like they love his fastball and they like some of his makeup, but I just don't think he deserves a spot on the major league roster.
And especially with the 40-man, like not only with Sheriff, and I agree with you, I think Sheriff is probably the most obvious option, especially with how well he's played throughout, spring training, pitched 6.2 innings, hasn't allowed a run yet, only allowed 4 hits over 7 strikeouts. I mean, I don't know how much better a guy could do to essentially show you that he deserves to make the MLB roster. And I think, especially with Caleb Ort, he's sort of, the odd man out or the obvious guy to be DFA'd, especially with, Ramel Tapia and Jorge Alfaro. At least when we're recording this right now, they're still on the Red Sox roster and aren't on the 40-man just yet. And so I think the Sox have a lot of tough decisions to make going into the next few days or so prior to when opening day does start. And, looking at the 40-man right now, Alan Castro, I remember seeing somebody post about him on Twitter on the 40-man, sort of confused. And then somebody was like, I think it's an error. But, he's a 19-year-old who has just played in the DR league. But he's on the 40-man roster. And, very curious to see if, the Sox do ultimately decide to DFA him if a team does pick him up. I think even if they, do a similar thing with Ort, I don't really see a lot of teams wanting to scour to like make sure that like they get Caleb Ort. No offense to him, he just hasn't really shown that he's a viable, major league pitcher. But I did see somebody else mention the possibility of, them putting Mondesi on the 60-day IL to open up a spot. But, if you think about it with Tapia, Alfaro, as well as Sheriff, I mean, that's 3 spots right there.
Yeah, so I don't think that Mondesi is going to end up being the guy that's gonna get a 60-day stint. So when we were down in Florida, the first week of spring training, when we spoke with Bloom there, we asked about Mondesi, and he was upfront and said, well, you're not going to see him this spring, and his spring training is going to be somewhere other than Boston, but we don't know where that's going to be just yet, but he's not far off. So I don't know if they're going to put him on a 60-day stint where they could, let's say they want to start him in AA just to, get his legs under him, and then he comes to AAA by the end of, say, April, just speculating with that. I don't know if he's the odd man out with that. I think the biggest thing is going to be is what is Rodriguez's status, and will that be a 60-day stint? And then, guys like Yu Chang, so Chang just reported to camp. He's going to play on Monday. He got a major league deal, but small money, $750,000, $800,000. There's not a major commitment there. Could he be the odd man out? But then again, they do need another infielder. So I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case, but Bobby Dahlbeck has also impressed this spring, and stop me if you've heard that before, but that's something where he has had a good spring. And if you look at some of Bobby Dahlbeck's, approach this year, it hasn't been really about mashing the ball over the wall. He's had really productive at bats, going opposite field, keeping his hands back. He's looked good at shortstop. Not that we want him to be playing shortstop, but he's looked good there. He's had a good camp where I don't see him being DFA'd, but also I didn't see Matt Barnes getting DFA'd either. Right. So the Red Sox, it's a good problem to have when you have these players and you're trying to figure out who you want to potentially move on from. It goes to show that there is more depth within the program than maybe some want to admit. It's really a matter of what makes the most sense. Tapia to me makes sense to make the roster. And if you were to say to me that tomorrow you were to find out that Ref Snyder didn't make the club, would you be surprised? I personally wouldn't be, because he hasn't had a good spring, but he also got a major league deal as well. So they got some decisions to make, but specifically with the with the bullpen, to me, and we've said it a few times, Sheriff to me makes the most sense, unless you have a random trade up your sleeve, and I don't see that happening just days before the season starts.
Yeah, I agree with you with that. And, with Dalbec, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. His approach has looked a lot better throughout this spring. He always seems to, mash the ball and look really good in spring. But I mean, from what I've seen, looking at the numbers, 22 strikeouts over 12 hits, still has an issue with striking out more than he gets on base. So that's something that makes me a little bit nervous, but you sort of already know what you're getting from Bobby Dalbec. And I think the Chang and Dalbec conversation is an interesting one, and one that could essentially be answered over the next few days or so. But we're not the GMs in this sort of situation. But if you do have an interest in being a major league GM, you got to check out the Ultimate Pro Baseball GM app over on the App Store, whether Google or also Apple App Store. It's honestly one of the coolest games I've played in a long time. I like to put my GM hat on, try to imagine that I'm Heimblum, Andrew Freeman, Farhan Zaidi, you know what I mean? Make all of these different moves and all these different decisions to ultimately get to the goal of winning a World Series and winning as many baseball games as possible. As you heard in our last episode, Lauren's kind of like way better than me at this. I try my best. I try to, channel into that my inner GM, but some decisions work out better than others, but in this game, you control the hiring, the right coaches and staff. You manage the team finances. You do scouting, drafting players. You also manage different personalities, like who's the cancer of the clubhouse, who's the leader, injuries as well. Obviously, we've seen the Red Sox deal with a lot of different injuries. So I try to figure out, what are the Sox doing? How can I, make better decisions or learn from what isn't working out with them? And then you also navigate through free agency and all the ups and downs of a season. And one thing that I've mentioned multiple times speaking about this app is, we've seen the Red Sox not keep their homegrown talent. I keep the homegrown talent. I actually spend money. I extend players. I try to learn from what the Red Sox have not done so well. But if you're looking for a challenging and realistic game and one that you can play offline on the go, that's Ultimate Pro Baseball GM. So Locked On Red Sox listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out and download the game. Just visit probaseballgm.com, scan the code, or look it up on the App Store. That's probaseballgm.com. The Ultimate Pro Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. And so, as I said with that app as well, we're not the GMs. I wish I could put on my GM hat, try and guess which way different things are going to go. But, really looking at it, I thought it was interesting how a guy like Josh Winkowski ended up ultimately making the team as a multi-inning reliever. Some expected it, some didn't. I wouldn't have been surprised if he did start the season in Worcester, but I'm happy that he's being rewarded for his productive spring. And he looks like a much different pitcher throughout these past few months than he did last year.
Yeah, no, Josh is he's really seized this opportunity. When we chatted with Chaim Bloom on the podcast, we had asked about Josh Winkowski and Carter Crawford. And Chaim mentioned that he went into more detail about Winkowski than he did about Carter Crawford. And we talked to him about how when we interviewed Winkowski, he said that he sucked last year and that he needed to be better, but also acknowledging that he was put in a really tough situation, but he tried to do the best that he could. Obviously not pitching above the AAA level, and now you're asked to be on a big league staff and maybe make 13 or 15 starts. Bloom was really, really high on what he's been able to do, and being able to now identify who a bulk inning type pitcher is going to be for that bullpen. You can piggyback him on a handful of guys with it being still this early, whether it's Chris Sale or Tanner Houck, and Houck hasn't really looked that impressive this spring, but I think that if you peel back that onion, it's really more about what he's been trying to do with some of his pitches, which has yielded to the result that you see with his 8+ ERA. But I think Winkowski's a guy that he could fill that Crawford mold last year, and I think the major benefit is the fact that he was able to go through a year where it sucks getting your head kicked in, but he knows how to prepare as a big league pitcher now. And if you look at the way that he's pitched this spring and with his starts, mixing his pitches, he's just looked different. He looks like a major league pitcher, where last year it was just this is Winkowski and the prospect that they grabbed in the Benintendi deal. Now it's Josh Winkowski. He looks like a big league pitcher.
And especially, showing off that stash and, also showing off that whole new grip with the slider as well.
Yeah.
It's been nice to see him, pinpointing his pitches. And, speaking about Josh Winkowski, when we have throughout this offseason, I've brought up these stats multiple times, but I think it's telling of like how important it is to get him comfortable in a multi-inning sort of situation. So in the first and second inning of last year's starts, he had a 3.21 ERA with 5 earned runs. And then in the third inning, and I don't know what happened in between, the second and third to ultimately make this happen, a 15.80 ERA with 24 earned runs. And then it's even crazier. In the fourth inning, he only allowed 1 earned run. So something happened in that third inning. Like something did. Like you don't just go from only allowing 5 earned runs in each of the first 2 innings and then, just bolt up to 24 earned runs. So I think especially getting him comfortable, a 2-inning sort of long reliever, maybe 3, I think that's the best way to not only build him up and get comfortable against the competition in the major leagues, but also get him to refine his stuff a little bit more going against some of that higher competition.
Yeah. And I think too, what's nice about Winkowski, especially off the beginning of the season, the people that you compare him with too, you know what I mean? Like we just mentioned Tanner Houck. I still think Houck's going to be fine. I've been really down on Nick Pivetta, and to be honest with you, I really would not be shocked if Winkowski leapfrogged Nick Pivetta. I really wouldn't be. And I think the fact that Pivetta can, throw 170 innings is completely overblown. They're not good innings. And it was really telling when Cora said to the Boston Globe that he didn't prepare well. So last season, I'd rather have productive prepared innings than just taking the ball and seeing what you have. But I think Winkowski could be a guy that you can pair off of a guy like Pivetta. So, it's, if you think about it, there was earlier, I want to say it was like around December, it was reported that the Red Sox would consider trading some of their surplus of pitching, and I think people laughed at that, and they made jokes about it on social media now. But if you go back and just look at it with an objective take, guys like Cutter and Winkowski And then you have Mata, Walter, Murphy, all in the system that are still now making their way up. And then there's another wave of young pitching behind them. The Red Sox are in a good spot where it's healthy. And you can interchange some of these guys to get this big league experience, to get them ready for these opportunities. So I'm excited for Winkowski and really just, seeing him down in the spring throwing. He's looked really good. I'm hoping he sticks for the full year. But, at least if he doesn't, he can go down to Worcester. He can start, get 5-6 innings in as well, and continue to refine that. And, who knows the way, obviously, a season goes. But if Winkowski gets to pitch more than 8 starts this season, I'm confident that he's going to be prepared to do that. And, we're going to get good innings out of Winkowski.
And I also remember when Bloom was talking about Crawford and Winkowski, and I can't remember which one of you guys asked him, but it was more along the lines of, if they perform well and sort of, make a log jam or like make it tougher decisions than you expected when Whitlock, Bayo, and Paxton come back, like how are you going to kind of go about that? And he's like, well, I'd, rather have that happen than not. You know what I mean? I think, looking back at sort of like that report of them wanting to trade the surplus of pitching, at least looking at it right now in hindsight, thank God that they didn't, what I mean? Especially with all these injuries. And it's always better to have more pitching depth than not. Obviously we saw that last season, but I think you're right. I think especially with what these guys not only have been able to do in spring training, but, hopefully they're able to, continue to elevate their value throughout this next season. And, Crawford, I know Jared and Tyler Milliken brought this up, on their last episode, but, he could be looked at as like a Whitlock 2.0 as a long reliever out of the bullpen. And especially if you have multiple guys like that in Crawford and Winkowski, or even if one of them becomes a good starter, like better to have more than none. And I think as well, another guy who like came out of nowhere, Zach Kelly, just got his first nod on the opening day roster. Obviously a friend of the podcast as well. Really nice guy. Super happy to see from what he, started with. I think he got like $500 from the Oakland A's as an undrafted free agent. And now, he's pitching for the Boston Red Sox on their opening day roster. And, it's been really nice to see him, flourish throughout spring training after, a few rough first outings, and hasn't let up a run in his last 5 games, when he's made appearances. So excited to see what he's able to do in full action, and not sort of what we saw of the small sample last season at the end of September. Yeah,
he's been I think it was like 3 earned runs in his first 2 games. And then since March 6th, he's been, I would say, the equivalent of lights out. So and it's great to see that too. It's he, again, will get to pitch in meaningful games with the Red Sox. He had a 3.95 ERA last year, I think, in 13, 14 games. So I'm excited for him, the fact that he got that call. And again, just continues to show, that these players are coming from within the program, and it's, not so much really through free agency or whatever too. I just want to circle back on something, because we were thinking about okay, how can they open up another spot on the 40 man for potentially, say, the bullpen? Have they said really how long that Wyatt Mills was going to be out for?
No, they didn't. I just obviously know that he's out with, I forget exactly what it is, but that was tough to see, because he was one guy that I was really excited.
He pitched really well. He pitched really well this spring.
I was excited to see what he could actually do in real game action as well. Yeah, he had he was diagnosed with elbow inflammation.
Hopefully that's not something that's going to be, a lengthy absence. But if that's something to where, is he the 60-day IL candidate that could potentially, open up that spot as well. We have on the Beyond the Monster Substack, we've been a few of these, we do these article projections of, and the 3.0 will be coming out, I believe, tomorrow on Monday morning. And, it was predicted we had Zach Kelly on there, but another name I don't think is going to make it. But I think we're going to see him maybe in May is Brian Mata. Brian Mata, so seeing him in person, kid is huge. He is just a big kid, throws hard, but the most important thing is he's healthy. Coming off of Tommy John, he's healthy. And I really think that a guy like Mata, give him a month down in AAA, he could be somebody that the Red Sox could call up in May that can go out of the bullpen. Maybe he gives you, 1 or 2 innings. Maybe he becomes that, the guy that piggybacks off of somebody else. I don't necessarily think that he's going to make the 40. It would be a shock if he did in the next, say 24 to 48 hours, if that's announced. But to have this conversation and be able to say that these guys that we've mentioned could all impact the Red Sox in a productive way. And when we talked to Chaim Bloom, he said the same exact thing. We want them to impact not because guys got hurt, but on their terms,
right?
Meaning the players' terms. And he thinks that we're going to, the fan base is going to see a lot of these guys impact the Red Sox this year in a positive way. And I'm excited for that. I'm excited to finally see homegrown developed pitching from the Boston Red Sox, because it's been a long time since we've seen that.
Yeah, me too. And I think I would put Mata and Walter in a very similar box. Walter only made 2 appearances with Worcester. Mata made 5. And, Mata is, like you mentioned, coming off of Tommy John surgery, struggled with a little bit of control last year. Definitely had to have been probably, just getting back into the groove of things after not throwing for a year or so in game action. But, that's one thing that I want to see from him a little bit more. I think maybe the month May, maybe a little bit, it was tough to say that, maybe a little bit early. I think June in my mind is a little bit makes me a little bit more comfortable. At least get him 10 games under his belt, so then he at least has like 15 games in AAA. That's just me, just because I don't like, when you look at Winkowski last year, he made 14 appearances in Worcester, and I just look at like maybe 15. It's like the threshold. Obviously, like it's all up to the guy's development and how comfortable he is. But like, especially with what we saw last year, just a little bit of PTSD and just making sure you don't rush a guy too much. A guy like Mata as well, who you don't really know if he's a long-term starter or a bullpen arm. And that's going to be the interesting thing for the Red Sox to sort of figure out when he does ultimately get that opportunity. But we're going to speak more about some of the other players that are going to be in the Red Sox bullpen during the 2023 season. But before we do that, I just want to talk to you about Built Bar. So they have a March Madness bracket, and you can actually choose your favorite bar or puff. And now's your time to make it count at builtmarchmadness.com to vote for your favorites. So I'll be voting for Marshmallow Puff. Unbelievable. Then they also got like brownie batter as well. They have some incredible flavors. 100% real chocolate, high protein, low sugar and carbs, and honestly tastes like a candy bar. So if you love Built Bars as much as Lauren and I do, you got to go and vote for your favorite bar or puff. And then you'll be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built. Not only that, but one Locked On fan will get a free 12-month subscription to Built to have their Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your door. So you got to get and try Built, the best protein bar out there. Like I said, just like a candy bar, but it's actually good for you. So run over to builtmarchmadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop on in and support your pick. But another guy that I'm really excited to see how the Red Sox picking him to be the closer ultimately does play out in Kenley Jansen. Obviously, we saw his first ever sort of struggling inning or struggling outing in a Red Sox uniform last game, where he allowed 2 earned runs due to a little bit of lightheadedness. He said, speaking with different sources, I don't think that, it's going to disrupt him from being able to start the opening day roster, but especially a guy who throughout his career has been looked at as one of the most dominant, closers throughout the last decade or so, and coming off of a great season with the Braves. I'm excited what he's able to do in Boston.
Yeah, me too. And first and foremost, the fact that, again, it's a legitimate 9th inning, arm. It's a legitimate 9th inning, option where, he can go out there and maybe he closes the door for 40 saves a season, which would be, it's going to be great to have that. The Red Sox aren't going out and spending $16 million per year on Kenley Jansen because, they don't think that they might be able to make a little bit of noise this season. I think that they have their expectations, but he also isn't coming here either without thinking that he could, make an impact with the Sox. So I'm excited for that. And he's the biggest knock initially was how he's going to do with the pitch clock. And he's really had no issues with that whatsoever. He's looked good. There was, a couple of appearances ago, kind of said that he looked shaky. I didn't see that, here's a guy that is traditionally lived in the upper zone when he's pitched because he throws fastballs. He's looked good there. He had that one home run, I think it was, where the wind carried the ball. Was it against the Twins? It might have been earlier in the spring. But then the other night, obviously, he started to get hit and he was laboring. And initially when he came off the mound with the trainer, I was like, oh no.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
Here we go.
I actually like tweeted a whole thing about like how awful it would be if the Red Sox lost their closer. And then somebody like replied, they're like, let's wait until like you actually hear a report that he's injured. I'm like, you're right, but like, yeah, I'm warranted to be like nervous with all these injuries and how much the Red Sox need this closer.
Yeah, I was out with a buddy and we were watching the NCAA tournament, and then I had just happened to look at the TV that was off to my right hand side and come off of the San Diego State game, and I'm like, don't tell me like that he's leaving with the trainer. And then I went on Twitter and I started seeing the tweets from the beat guys. And then I started sending a couple of texts out being like, I know it just happened 30 seconds ago, but what's like the vibe? And I was happy to get the, like, even before the tweets came out saying it's not going to be a big deal. So it was exciting to know that it's not going to be that big of a deal. But, again, it's a closer and it's somebody that Cora can have the confidence in the ninth inning, and just the different options too to lead up to Kenley Jensen is going to be exciting. And hopefully gets off to a pretty good start too. You know what I mean? Especially getting a big free agent contract. And we know how sometimes the fan base can be, coming out, getting the season underway, slamming the door shut on a handful of wins with what is a favorable schedule to begin the season. I think we'll go and build some confidence there, not only just for Kenley Jansen, but the bullpen and the team in general. So, I'm excited for it. I've been asking and writing about Kenley Jansen the last couple of years. He's been a free agent and whether would be a fit for the Red Sox. And there's been times where people have kind of poo-pooed that idea because of different metrics that he's had. And I know sometimes what StatCast says, but also, there's also a reason why that he's one of the best closers in baseball. Yes, he's 35, 36, but he was one of the best closers in baseball for a reason. So I'm happy to see him here in Boston. So
me too. The poo-poo thing like made me think of the poupée from like the latest Ted Lasso episode. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Sorry, I'm 5 years old. But two guys that I wanted to end our bullpen conversation on is two that I think have a lot of pressure on them going into this season. But in my opinion, they're on two different spectrums. John Schreiber was last season a fluke, and with him struggling throughout spring training thus far, does that indicate maybe he'll do the same in the regular season play? And then Ryan Brazier, obviously a much different season than Schreiber had last year. A lot of pressure on him to show not only the Red Sox front office, but Red Sox fans that he deserves to be on this 26-man roster and that he's a major league bullpen arm. And hopefully he does much better than most people expect. And this is probably, I'm going to start off with Brazier. Like, this is probably one of the most positive things that you're going to hear from this podcast regarding Ryan Brazier. For people who have listened for a long time, like Lauren and I don't love Ryan Brazier. It's not the person, it's just the pitcher. But, outside of 3 innings where he allowed 1 to 2 runs throughout the spring, his 4 other outings were scoreless. He's looked all right. So, trying to stay positive with a guy who you don't really know how he's going to do. Hopefully he's able to do much better than last year where he struggled. And hopefully, kind of like why the Red Sox decided DFA Barnes over Brazier's because of his good September numbers. Hopefully that correlates. And then Schreiber as well, it was interesting to hear him say, I feel like this spring I still had some stress under me. He said trying to come into this spring and keep everything looking good on the mound and all that kind of stuff. I feel like that might be semi like a mental thing of like remembering, obviously where he was going into the 2022 season where he didn't have a spot. And now he has to do everything possible to make sure he keeps that spot.
Yeah, Ryan Brazier is the lightning rod of Red Sox social media, and
yeah, that's true.
So, look, he's on the big league roster, so I'm going to want to see him do well. There's a reason why that the Red Sox continue to keep him around. Rob Bradford tweeted a bunch of stuff and even wrote on it, and obviously he interviewed him during the offseason just about he had electric stuff, and some of this and the numbers that he put up towards the end of the season were some of the best out of relievers in baseball. And the Red Sox feel that if he's healthy, and they can get a full season out of him, they might be able to get back the Brazier that they had in the 2018 season. He has, within fairness, he's had dealt with some hiccups. He took the line drive off his head a couple of years back. While it's easy to joke on Ryan Brazier, and trust me, we've all have had our opinions and tweets and things like that on Brazier, but I think if you have him go in there not having to be, for example, the 8th inning guy, 6th, 7th guy here or there, and really build him into, a spot to pitch really meaningful innings for me, makes sense. He doesn't have to go in there and do too much this year. Just be part of what the bullpen's trying to do, throw strikes, limit your walks, and for love of God, don't give him home runs. You know what I mean? So, I'm hoping that, he's got the confidence that's there. I mean, clearly he does. I mean, he said to, Rob Bradford, I'm going to paraphrase, he wanted to be back. He knew he was going to pitch. It was just a matter of where, so he still thinks that he can do it. So, hope for the Red Sox sake that that's the case. But if he struggles and he struggles for, 2 months, at some point you got to pull the cord. This whole Ryan Brazier experiment has to end, but I don't want to put that cart before the horse. So, I'm hoping that, again, he comes in, he's a 6th inning type of guy, 7th inning type of guy. He doesn't have to pitch in really big situations. Now, if injuries happen and he's forced to do that, then I'm going to be concerned until he can show that he can be a reliable member of that bullpen.
And with him too, some people who are listening to this might be surprised me saying this, but I'm going to go into this season with an open mind and hope, like you said, that he performs well. Now, if he is like an awful, ERA and awful statistics going into June, I'm not going to be super happy about it. I'm going to be blunt and honest about it. But if he goes out there and shoves, I'm going to give him his props. I'm going to give him his flowers. You know what I mean? As Sox fans, we want to see these guys perform as well as possible, and nobody wants to see a guy let up a 2 or 3 run home run to ultimately tie or lose the game. You know what I mean? And he's done that plenty of times, but hopefully he can avoid it, like you said. And I think with a lot of this bullpen, I feel like, some of the injuries might hurt it, but I think as well with how they were really able to upgrade throughout this offseason, it's going to be very critical for them to be at the top of their game, especially in the first few months with the amount of limited high quality options in the rotation. I feel like for a guy like Houck, who you don't know if he's going to go more than 5 innings, you might need Winkowski to go in there and be the bridge. You know what I mean? And you might need some of these other guys to overwork a tiny bit just to be able to help these starters get along if they only go 4 to 5 innings and they're not able to stretch out to 6 or so. But very curious to see how it does all play out. But as always, we're going to keep you posted about everything that's happening regarding the Boston Red Sox over here on Locked On Red Sox. So if you have not yet, make sure to subscribe over on YouTube, wherever audio platform that you listen to. Also, make sure to follow us over on Twitter at LO_Red Sox. And for Chris, if anybody wants to go and check out your stuff and support Beyond the Monster, where can they find all that?
Yeah, so you can head over to at Beyond the Monster. Just the thing is, it's MNSTR because there's only so many characters Twitter lets you use in your for your handle. But you can also check me out. It's my first and last name at Chris Henrique. But besides me too, make sure you're checking out the other guys. They do a lot of really, really good work between Jamie Gatlin. We have Ed Hand, who put together a 6-week kind of like a deep dive of the players to look out for if you're going to go see any one of those teams. We just added Jake O'Donnell to the mix. Andrew Parker's done a lot of really good content with the minor league stuff. I mean, that's just to name a few. We have 18 writers now, and all of these guys. Ryan Medeiros too. Please make sure you check out him. He puts together some outstanding threads. Some are featured in The Athletic, and we have 2 podcasts with him coming out, just talking about everything for Major League Baseball. So besides me, please check out the guys too. They do a really good job, and it's a reason why we're as successful as we've been so far. And check out the Obstructed Red Sox podcast if you haven't. Chaim Bloom, that interview. It's a quick listen, 25 minutes, and a lot of good stuff.
I also write a tiny bit here there for Beyond.
Yes, Jake also writes. I apologize.
Like once a month or so. Like once a month or so.
Jake has an article that just came out. So if you head over to beyondthemonster.substack.com, there's a Yoshida article that is there.
Yes,
I mean, just to name a few, Boston Sports Gordo, another one that writes. I mean, we have a big cast of characters that's and now we just added the Pesky Report group as part of our podcast. So there's a lot of Red Sox content. We're really looking forward to bring more this season, and plus the Bruins and the Patriots, and eventually we'll do Celtics, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, been loving everything you guys have been doing over there, and you know I'll always be supporting. And so, you know, as Chris said, Heim Bloom episode just came out. I know that you guys are going to be posting episodes throughout the season. So, you know, right after you listen to this podcast, go over and check out Obstructed View throughout the season, or even just right now. But as always, greatly appreciate everybody tuning in and making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. Now make your second listen Locked On Fantasy Baseball. Win your fantasy league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball, wherever you get your podcasts and over on YouTube. Also make sure to follow myself on Twitter. It's at Jake Iggy, and also Lauren. It's la 3 laws, Lauren with 4 R's. But we'll end this episode how we always end it. Keep the faith and let's go Sox. Peace.